Mortal Kombat Trilogy is the second updated version of Mortal Kombat 3. That being the first update, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Let me explain something about this game. Or just Mortal Kombat 3 in general. When the game first came out in the arcades and home consoles and whatnot, people, well, they didn't seem to like it because, for whatever reason being, the people behind the game decided to say, you know what, let's get rid of something that's popular. Jade and Scorpion and a couple other things. What's kind of also weird is that Sub-Zero was also unmasked for some reason being. I don't know if they were trying to give him something different or what. But he would get unmasked several years later at this point, but still, I don't know what they were thinking. It wasn't like a bad game or nothing, but Mortal Kombat 3 itself just wasn't doing anyone favors. So they addressed the criticisms and some feedback, and they ended up making Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, also on the arcades and other home consoles. We were then presented Mortal Kombat Trilogy, another updated version, but this one came out on PS1, Nintendo 64, and later on PC and Sega Saturn. Here's the thing about each different versions. Each different version has like their own exclusive features in terms of removing content, or perhaps just being a better version. Now, in terms of Nintendo 64 and PC version, there's no load times, but the PS1 and Saturn does. But there are some differences you might notice in different versions. Either there's some removable characters or what. But my experience with the game mostly is through the Nintendo 64 version. I mean, that was the only one I could really find, but it's fine for me. I don't know what it is, but I've always just played on Nintendo 64, and I always just enjoy playing that one for whatever reason. But I just think because I feel like it's more arcade aesthetic, you know, you get it. It's like, it feels like you're playing more of an arcade game on Nintendo 64 because there's no load times, unlike the PS1 and Saturn. The game was also made available in GOG in recent years. It's not to be confused with Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3. What Trilogy does here is that they add in stages and characters, costumes based on Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3. But the gameplay, most majority, is basically the same as Mortal Kombat 3, but there is some tweaks and a couple of differences you guys should notice. The first thing is the aggressor. This is more like when you make a bunch of combos and you basically just keep going faster with your punches, kicks, and whatever. There was also the brutality mechanic, which is also introduced with this one. Not just brutality, but you'll also be doing animalities, babalities, and fatalities. Look at that little man. Oh, and sorry for stinking and watching me get destroyed in this video. Like I said before, most of my experience with the game was the Nintendo 64 version. There's also this 2-on-2 combat and this 8-player combat. I think it just depends on the versions or like whatever platforms you get, but the Nintendo 64 version lacks both the Khan's Arena and the bank from Mortal Kombat 2 and 3. And look, this is one of the earliest Nintendo 64 games that came out in 1996, so you can't really say nothing else. It could either have something to do with hardware limitations or cartridge limitations, or maybe a little bag of both, but who knows. But this game itself, you could play up to 2 players and just do all sorts of craziness to each other. I once accidentally discovered a babality. I was just mashing buttons on the Nintendo 64 controller, and a little baby came out. I'm not making this up. You know, I've always seen these Midway collections always bring out Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. Sometimes they'll bring in 3, the original, or sometimes Ultimate. But for some weird reason, they never really seem to bring this one for, again, just for whatever reason being. Even though this is like the second updated version of Mortal Kombat 3. But I think this one plays pretty well in terms of like everything. I think the aggressor is pretty great, but if you don't like it, you can always turn it off in the in-game settings if you really want to. Also, the PC version has all the characters unlocked, including the original version of the Mortal Kombat 3 Sub-Zero, but you can also play the newer version of Sub-Zero itself. But again, There's all the characters already unlocked on the GOG version. And yes, it has controller support if asking, but definitely just use the controller first before doing anything, because for some weird reason, the game just recognizes as 2 players if you play around the keyboard. So just a little advice for a heads up. But I think it's just the cheapest one. Although the PC version, some sound effects or some music have been lower pitched for some reason being. But yeah, I'm not gonna say that every version of the game is perfect by all means. Some costumes get removed, some moves get removed. But again, it just depends on the platform, so you're gonna have to do some deep diving as to whichever version that you think might be best suited for you. But not many characters has this, but they do have the retro costumes from the past Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 games, which is a pretty nice bonus if you ask me. Now, I did mention some of the modes, but in case you guys are ever interested, the Nintendo 64 version has an exclusive 3-on-3 battles. So that's just something just to keep in mind if you're going to probably get yourself the Nintendo 64 version, which is pretty cool. It's kind of weird how the CD versions of PS1 and Saturn and PC don't have this, but the Nintendo 64 of all things does. This might be the unique version. Maybe there's some people that actually do like that version because of that unique mode. But just like Mortal Kombat 3, there's an endurance one. Yeah, that's another thing. And you guys are probably not going to get past this unless you really are good at Mortal Kombat 3. Or Trilogy. Or Ultimate. It really doesn't matter because they all play quite similar to another. It's just this version. It just has some differences in terms of tweaks and gameplay and some newer additions to the game. But I would just go on and say that depending which platform, there are some mixed to positives. But again, it all depends on the platform you're playing. But although the Nintendo 64 did get somewhat lesser views, I don't think it's a bad version of the game. Considering it does have something that could be worth your purchase if you already played on a PS1 or maybe perhaps the Sega Saturn of all things. But I think this is going to be like more of the funnest Mortal Kombat games you'll play, or maybe perhaps whichever Mortal Kombat 3 game that you'll play.